Each weekday morning, we look at newspapers from all across the country to pick up the stories that you might pick up for yourself if you had nothing but time to read newspapers. Here's our top story today. The Baton Rouge Advocate says it is tournament time. We'll start there today. LSU is involved in the first game of the NCAA basketball tournament. LSU versus Butler at the Greensboro Coliseum. 12:20 Eastern Time today. If you've been making predictions either for fun or profit, you should have your brackets filled in by now. The president becomes Barack Obama. In the New York Daily News today, the White House released his picks for the NCAA tournament. You can even see some of his scribbles in his handwriting where he couldn't quite make up his mind. The story here says he went conservative in choosing 3 number 1 seeds and a number 2. His prediction, Carolina over Louisville in the final. An NCAA business angle in the Chicago Tribune. CBS has already won the online revenue bracket, it says. The online audience for the NCAA grew 165% this year. CBS particularly pleased with the boss button that takes basketball video off your computer screen at work and immediately puts up a mock spreadsheet. Last year it was clicked 2.5 million times. Staying in Chicago, the Sun-Times now, a 2-page spread out of a story that seemed to appear in every paper this morning. There's a new baby boom going on in America. More babies born in 2007 than in any other year, even in the baby boom years of the 50s. Like every story, there is an economic spin for the future, though. The birth rate may go down now as people look at the cost of adding to their family. To screen or not to screen for prostate cancer, 2 major studies have been published. Neither came up with convincing evidence that routine prostate cancer screening does much to actually save lives. There are some questions about the studies. One study provided more support for screening than the other, and now the advice for most men seems to be to continue with screenings as had been previously recommended. An 8-year-old girl named Wild Freeborn has the Girl Scouts hopping mad. She has been told she violated the national scouting rules by selling her cookies on the internet. The New York Times covers the controversy today. Her father set up a webpage to advertise her cookie offer, but he says his daughter only collected names online. She actually delivered all the cookies personally and collected the money in person, so she doesn't, in his view, violate the Girl Scout rules. To the front page of the New York Times, it seems that $1 trillion is enough to buy a front-page headline these days. Here's the opening paragraph from the lead story in the Times about the Federal Reserve. It says the Federal Reserve sharply stepped up its efforts to bolster the economy on Wednesday, announcing that it would pump an extra $1 trillion into the financial system by purchasing Treasury bonds and mortgage securities. The headline on the story in the Wall Street Journal is Fed in bond buying binge to spur growth. The Journal says with no room left to move on interest rates, the Fed had to take another approach, which led to this decision to print money. In the Washington Post, the headline, Fed to pump $1.2 trillion into markets. So everybody always wants to know, what does this mean to interest rates? Rarely is there a really good answer. The LA Times takes a shot at it today, predicting that mortgage rates will drop a full point. This and the AIG bonus story continue to be the big economic headlines. On AIG from the New York Daily News, columnist Michael Daly, who says, we as taxpayers are majority owners of AIG and have a right to know who was paid what and whether they contributed to the financial disaster there. Columnist Michael Goodwin has some praise, though, for AIG boss Edward Liddy after his congressional testimony yesterday. He takes a salary of only $1 a year. He came onto the company after all of this started, so he's not part of the bonus mess himself. Goodwin says Liddy came off as a smart, straight shooter. He proved himself a cut above those who aim to make a cheap headline at his expense. Goodwin goes on to say, I'd like to see him question Congress on its role in the economic mess. Continuing with the Daily News, the sad follow-up story to the story we covered yesterday about Natasha Richardson. Liam Neeson on the front page, returning home after pulling the plug on his wife's life support. The actress was brain dead after suffering a head injury in what at first seemed like a minor fall while skiing in Quebec. In Austria, Josef Fritzl pleaded guilty to all of the charges against him, and the sentence of life in prison came this morning, long after the papers had gone to press. It wasn't supposed to be this easy for the prosecution. He was expected to fight at least some of the charges related to the 24 years he kept his daughter imprisoned in a dungeon. A story in the San Francisco Chronicle today says his decision to admit the charges may have come because he was unnerved by the presence of his daughter in court. Science meets the economy for a story in the Las Vegas Sun. Okay, you got your foreclosed house with a pool that nobody's maintaining. How do you keep the pool from turning into a breeding ground for bugs without hiring an expensive pool guy? The answer is fish. The inch-long minnow, Gambusia affini, is particularly popular because it eats mosquito larvae. The Raleigh News and Observer says love is not in the tea leaves these days. Psychics are being asked to divine more practical things like the stock market or job prospects. Just so you know, the right index finger is where you look for signs of future wealth. Those $200 skin treatments you've paid for might not be the required maintenance that your local spa would have you believe. The New York Times says dermatologists are questioning the anti-aging claims made by some spas. There are elements of spa skin services that doctors agree with. The story includes a tip sheet that says exfoliation, microdermabrasion, glycolic peels, and extractions are all worthwhile. Although, as somebody pointed out to me on Facebook this morning, the hour away from the kids might serve a useful purpose as well. Finally, have a look at the flying car in the New York Post today. It's called the Transition. Within 30 seconds of landing, you can have the wings folded up and be driving away. It'll be on the market in 2 years for about $200,000. The CEO of the manufacturing company says this will make travel a hassle-free integrated land-air experience. Although the law says takeoffs and landings must be at an airport, so it might not be entirely hassle-free. We do this every day at patspapers.com. On our website, you'll find links to all of the stories I've talked about today.